The Simon Interview. My interview with the infamous Simon, editor of the Necronomicon, first appeared in Behutet magazine, issues 16 and 17. In the 1920s, a horror writer from New England spun a mythology through his short stories that have come to be known collectively as the Cthulhu mythos. These stories focused on entities known as the Old Ones, and often featured a certain book of black magic known as the Necronomicon. Other writers started adding stories to the mythos, and as the mythology grew, so did interest in the supposedly fictional book. In the 1970s, the dread Necronomicon finally surfaced, or rather several Necronomicons surfaced. One from Philadelphia that was nothing but the same 6 pages of Arabic repeated over and over. One from England that kept very close to the Lovecraft stories and claimed to be translated by John Dee, and another that was a book of occult-related paintings by H.R. Geiger. None of these, however, has even come close to the popularity and mystery of what has become known as the Simon Necronomicon. Published in NY in 1977, the first edition of 666 leather-bound copies sold out quickly. The next edition of 3,333 copies also sold fast, and Avon Publications started putting out mass paperback editions soon after. By far the best-selling occult book of the century, the Necronomicon can be purchased at almost every bookstore in America. The second edition to the Necronomicon contains a preface detailing the events and persons involved in its production. Only small hints, however, are given about Simon, the driving force behind the book. It makes reference to him as a priest, a magician, and hints that he was also active as a spy. These colorful references painted an even greater mystery around the book, and for some threw more doubt on its authenticity. Apart from the Necronomicon, he was an active lecturer at Magical Child on subjects ranging from ceremonial magic to herbalism. In 1981, Simon wrote the Necronomicon Report, a short piece detailing a simpler method for using the 50 seals of Marduk than is given in the Necronomicon proper. Shortly after the Necronomicon Report was published, he disappeared rather suddenly from the NY occult scene. That's that last anyone has heard from Simon until now. In 2001, I decided to try to find Simon and interview him for Behutet. It was no easy task. Even after I cleared up the matter of his identity, I still had trouble finding out where he had disappeared to. After a year of investigation, I found Simon living in Malaysia, and he agreed to speak with me about his time as a priest, his involvement in the intelligence community, his views on magic, and of course the infamous Necronomicon. This interview was conducted via email around Samhain 2002. I nominandum. To my knowledge, the last anyone has heard or read anything new from Simon was in 1981 when your book Necronomicon Report was published. The absence of your public presence and the cryptic descriptions of you in the preface to the second edition of the Necronomicon, such as the mention of correspondence from Balkan embassies and a photo of an F-104 fighter that you carried along with the Necronomicon in your attaché case, has led to Simon becoming somewhat of an occult mystery. Even to people that met you in NY during the 70s and 80s, you are somewhat of an enigma. I have even talked to people that don't believe that you exist at all, and that Simon was actually an alias of Herman Slater. I have even heard one theory that Simon is actually Sandy Pearlman, the producer-writer that penned Don't Fear the Reaper. Realizing that you can't fully disclose your identity, what can tell us about yourself and your background that isn't covered in the Necronomicon? Simon. Well, I'm neither Herman Slater nor Sandy Pearlman, as disconcerting or flattering as those assumptions may be. I have gathered material for a book that will disclose more of the background of the Necronomicon and the stories of some of those involved, and we'll go into all of that in some detail at that time. For now, though, a few items you mentioned deserve clarification. The reference to the F-104 is genuine, although that paragraph was written tongue-in-cheek. In 1969, I was privileged to sit in on a quiet little meeting between religious leaders in New York City to which a famous athlete was invited. This gentleman had left the ring. He was a wrestler from the days when that was still considered a noble pursuit, and was now, according to his own statements made during the meeting, working as a contract agent for the CIA in Lebanon. His specialty was smuggling aircraft into Israel, crated up in boxes or otherwise disguised, via Luxembourg. The jets would be assembled in Luxembourg, if my memory serves me correctly, and then flown into Israel. The purpose of this arcane procedure evidently had something to do with circumventing congressional approval for the sale of this aircraft. The athlete in question died very young. It is virtually impossible to get detailed information about his life after the ring, although I tried to do so even while he was still alive in the 1970s and hit a brick wall. Former athletes, especially prize fighters, are susceptible to intelligence agency overtures. There have been several other cases in the past, better documented but still light on details. As for myself, I have been involved in overseas activities since before the Necronomicon was ever published, and continue to do so. I've spent a great deal of time in China, for instance, as well as in other countries in Asia. I've also had long experience in Latin America. I was taken on a tour of Moscow by a former KGB officer who served in Cuba, for instance. So it is inevitable that stories develop about espionage activities or intelligence connections. Many of the Eastern Orthodox churches are, or were, hotbeds of intelligence activity for both sides in the Cold War, and I was pretty much in the center of all that. Readers interested in learning more about Eastern Orthodox Church involvement in the Cold War are recommended to the books by Christopher Simpson and others, such as Blowback, Unholy Trinity, etc. To be involved in Eastern Orthodoxy in the 1960s was to be involved in the Cold War and in psychological warfare and intelligence activity. Valerian Trifa, head of the Romanian Orthodox Church for most of the post-war years, is an excellent example. He was in reality an SS officer and committed Nazi who had never been ordained, but who took over the American branch of the Romanin Orthodox Church by force. He was eventually indicted by the US government, but fled to Europe before he could be arrested and died in exile. And that is only one example. The churches with which I was involved were all anti-communist cells with heavy American intelligence involvement. I nominandum. Are you still active as a priest? If so, for what church? If not, what happened? Simon. I am hors de combat on that front. My disillusionment with the church had much to do with politics, both internal and external. I nominandum. Were your superiors in the church aware of your occult interests? Simon. Ha! My superiors were, if anything, as fascinated with the occult as anyone. Some had very definite ideas that anything occult was prima facie evidence of satanic influence. Others found the subject tantalizing. Of course, anyone involved with exorcism to any degree finds themselves involved in a study of occultism, everything from shamanism to ceremonial magic, as part of the general background necessary to their expertise. That is, one needs to determine the provenance of the phenomenon known as demonic possession in each individual case. Is it an example of true demonic possession? Is it spirit possession of the type familiar to practitioners of Voodoo or Siberian shamanism? Is there a third party involved, such as in a sortilege or some practices of Santeria, etc., etc.? In nominandum, the people who knew you back in the 70s and 80s that I spoke to all had no means of getting in touch with you. It seems you disappeared rather suddenly, which of course sparked more rumors of espionage. This time the rumor was that you were in some trouble with the US government. Any truth to this? Simon. That is a difficult question to answer. The US government has many factions, some of which do not know or approve of what the other factions are doing. I think I can honestly say that I have never been in trouble with the US government per se, although have run slightly afoul of various elements of it from time to time. I will write about that in more detail at a later date. It involves a whole slew of other suspects, the anti-war movement, American and Soviet spying through the mechanism of the Eastern churches, etc. Yet, in case anyone is wondering, the US government never had a problem with me in that regard, that I know of. Sorry to be so cryptic.